Greetings, blessings, and gratitude for choosing Dissected the Podcast with Chooks and kae-c. In this episode, we need to talk about relationship breakdowns and when to draw the line.
Serious topic.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So we both have our own experiences. Mine was many moons ago, if I'm going to be specific, 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And yours is fairly recent, so we'll both be coming from different, I guess, different vibes. However, the outcome was still the same. And so it's more about the journey, how I've gotten to where I am now, and potentially where you see yourself in the future, maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, for me, I think relationship breakdowns are something that it's almost like I want to say double-edged sword, but I'm not even sure if that's exactly what I'm trying to say. I feel like it can go one of two ways. It can either be the best decision or the best the best decision you make or the best outcome to a situation that you make, or it can be the worst, let's say, just for ease of conversation. But there's obviously a whole load of nuances in between the two. I think that it's difficult to just to personalize it to myself. It's difficult for me to kind of decipher where I sit in that situation just because of the nuance. Just to give a bit of context, I was with my ex-wife for 7 years. We were married for 5 years. Got a 3-year-old daughter. And don't know how many months ago, can't be bothered to do the maths at this particular moment, but within the last year, the relationship broke down, and I am now living somewhere else. And getting back to my original point, as much as me leaving was the right thing for me to do, there is a whole load of guilt attached. There is a whole load of doubt attached even. There is a whole load of questions, I assume, on both sides, no matter how well I feel like I am able to articulate my points and thoughts and reasons, and they're still mine, and they still come from my experience and my life. So like I said, a lot of guilt involved. I think, as I said, as much as was and is the right thing for me to do, it is still fraught with difficult thought processes, especially relating to my child, especially relating to the amount of time I spend with her, the amount of experiences that I miss, the amount of bonding, let's say, that I feel like I'm losing. So, yeah, it's a big weighing up on a daily basis of, doubting yourself, doubting whether you made the right decision, doubting whether I've told myself that this is a decision for her, but is she the priority in the decision? Is it me? Is it, do you know what I mean? There's so many things. So
So it's
yeah.
obvious from what you're saying that you are the person who left the relationship. If
Yeah.
maybe for the benefit of the listeners, just explain or give a little bit of information as to why you felt the need to leave, just so they're not out there thinking you were some crazy dude doing crazy stuff and got your black bags chucked out the door. So just
Um,
a little bit of context on that part.
okay. Yeah, to be fair, I'm not trying to move like I'm some saint. To be fair, she probably could have dashed my bags out at some point during the relationship. Do you know what I mean? I'm a weird person in a lot of ways, so who knows? Um, okay, for me, it was a gradual, I would say, escalation of arguments, disagreements, and conflict. The inability to communicate well, kindly, constructively with each other. A general undertone of disrespect. Um, and frustration on my part. And frustration is maybe my biggest fear, because I know that I don't deal well with being frustrated. And that frustration was kind of, I believe anyway, was underpinned by a lack of understanding of who I am. So there's a feeling of being misunderstood and being treated as, it's exhausting to be treated as somebody that you're not. Especially when, you know, to be fair, this was probably like the first time where I've really invested in somebody, really kind of just put it all there, like good, bad, and indifferent. Um, this person, this house, this family is my everything. And it was not received in that way.
Do you
I
think
felt gone.
sorry, do you think there would have been any difference if you didn't get married or if you maybe waited longer to get married? Because this is actually a conversation that I had with my son recently. When is a good time? Um, Sometimes when people are together for too long, it almost disrupts the flow and the relationship breaks down because they were dating for 10 years and then they decide to get married. And sometimes
Mm,
just um, because people tend to put their best forward, it takes
mm,
a while to be in a series of scenarios where you can actually see how your partner navigates through certain things, if they're even able to. And
mm.
so maybe something comes out that you weren't aware of in the beginning. So do you think it could have gone any better if you had just stayed together and not got married? Or was your mindset like, I'm putting everything into this, this is what I need to do, this is the step that I'm going to take?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, if I'm honest. Um, I I can definitely say that before meeting my ex, it was never on my mind to get married. Um, I can definitely say that it was something that um, yeah, I don't regret doing. Um, I feel like it was one of the blessings of kind of meeting her and being around her and being involved with her family and kind of seeing that as a benefit to a relationship and our relationship. Um, I will say that I can understand that maybe the the lack of a long engagement um, or a long engagement maybe might have helped. I don't know, maybe might have enabled us to kind of invest more in understanding each other rather than kind of spending might as well say the second year of our relationship kind of focused on planning a wedding and all of that kind of stuff. So maybe that was a year that we maybe missed in kind of investing in each other and understanding each other and that kind of thing. So yeah, I can say that. But as far as time wise, I don't necessarily believe that waiting for, I don't feel like we necessarily got married too soon. I just think that we didn't spend enough time focused on understanding each other. And that ended up coming later. And, you know, yeah, that, in answer to your question, that's what I would say. And it's very difficult on my side just because I feel like there was no kind of, let me not say no. I wasn't able to use the resources maybe that were available to me as far as getting a blueprint and getting kind of a sounding board because, you know, I'm not the most forthcoming with being vulnerable in situations, especially when they don't just concern me, if that makes sense. So there was only really a small group of people I felt like that were even qualified to kind of advise me on this as a subject. And, you know.
And that's in the absence of both your mum
Yeah.
and dad, different reasons. Just
100%. 100%. And yeah, I don't want it to seem as if her parents weren't. They were definitely a resource I could have and maybe should have used more. But like I say, it just didn't really um it didn't really enter my mind to use that as a resource, especially when things started getting rocky, just because, you know, I believe that, you know, you're gonna look through the lens of your child, or your relative, let's say, and you know, almost felt like I didn't have the limbs of a parent that's gonna have solely my interests at heart and give me the best advice for me and understand my perspective. And maybe that is a bit unfair on them because, you know, they probably would have. Not even probably, I think they would have done their best to at least, you know.
that conversation in itself would have been really difficult because, like you say, you're speaking to somebody about uncomfortable situations or behaviors that are being displayed by their loved one. And so until you have that conversation, you don't know how it's going to be received. And yes, it could have been received with, do you know what, I'm going to have a chat with her about that, and maybe hearing it from me will come across slightly different.
Yeah.
But the flip side of the coin is also that it could have been, well, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? And maybe going back to her and saying that you've had a conversation. And, you know, I'm not saying it's that black or white, but it could have
I
gone.
get you. 100%.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a gamble. So I completely get what you say about not having that sounding board. And I can relate to it, ironically, even though I had a plethora of people around me,
Right.
there was nobody who I would speak to. So quite the opposite situation, but just feeling very isolated and feeling like I wasn't able to have those conversations also.
For what reason though? Why did you not feel So this network that you speak of, I'm presuming it's family, is parent, is I
Yeah.
don't know,
So
friends
yeah,
at the time.
at the time, my mum had come back from living in America for 11 years.
Mm,
Um, I obviously had my dad who raised me. There was my gran and granddad at the time. Um, Friendship groups. Uh, there was a lot of people around, and
mm,
I actually thought about this just before coming on.
mm,
And what came to mind was the most influential people in my life at that time, or role models, were,
mm.
in the absence of my mum, my dad, and my grandmother.
Right.
My dad being a religious person, um, being married to his wife for a couple of decades at the time. My gran having been married for decades, and um, me definitely having a feeling of I can't let them down.
Mm,
And so, in times of turmoil, distress, whatever,
mm,
two people who I should have gone to because I knew undoubtedly that they would have my back were the two people I didn't talk to because I didn't want to disappoint them. Because for me, their vision is, and what my grand's always spoken about is, you're going to have problems in relationships, but you need to work through them.
mm,
She'd always tell me about stories about my granddad, and not that he was a naughty guy, but I do recall a story she told me one time of him going down the pub and not coming back till 1 o'clock the next morning. And she
mm,
said, me just set the bar and pour some J's inside there. J's is bleach.
mm,
And lift him up and me put him in there. Now, I don't know where my granddad was, but she obviously felt she knew where my granddad was. And
mm,
she lifted this man up and put him in the bath of J's. Um, I think if that happened nowadays, there'd be some serious complications and implications. But
mm,
her point was, she could have just said, "That's it. Like, you don't get to sleep out and you're married to me. Go about your business. Go back to wherever it is that you spent the night
mm,
where you came from." Which is very much the mentality now, right? So, um, where do you kind of find a balance between strong, independent woman that isn't going to put up with any nonsense and, um, I guess, some, oh, I don't know what you call it, because I feel like if she didn't react in that way, because my granddad definitely learned his lesson, and she said he never did it again.
mm,
If she didn't do that, does that mean that he would have potentially gone off and done it again? Not saying that he was doing
mm,
what he was doing. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was. I don't know. Um,
mm.
but if she didn't respond in such a direct, no nonsense, not around here, mate
Yeah.
way, maybe he would have
I
continued.
think the key that what I hear from that is something that I definitely know. It's a cliche or whatever, but we we teach people how to treat us.
100%.
So um it's so easy to, you know, accept missed opportunities to what I would call regulate a situation or set boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
um, and more importantly, put consequences when boundaries are crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's a slippery slope because when you don't set a boundary and someone crosses a boundary, when you don't verbally make it clear what your boundary is, and somebody crosses that boundary, then you inwardly look at yourself and resent yourself for not setting that boundary. Then when you set a boundary and don't um, what's the word? Enforce a consequence, you then have the resentment towards the person for crossing the boundary, even though they know what the boundary is, and then you have the resentment towards yourself for not making sure the consequences in effect, right? So I think in my situation there was definitely elements of both of those things. There were definitely elements of me kind of being a people pleaser, not wanting to upset, not wanting to kind of be seen as needy. Whether that's what I would have been seen as, I'm not. We'll never know. But setting boundaries for certain things beforehand, in a calm state of mind, in constructive conversation, rather than being reactive when a boundary maybe that I haven't articulated, that I haven't made clear, is stepped over. Then we deal into kind of expectations and the mother of all F-ups, when you expect people to know how to move and they don't. But, so, yeah, like I said, we definitely teach people how to treat us. And then I think even the person with the longest temper and the longest fuse and the most understanding nature reaches a point where I reached a point where I couldn't see how this was going to go anywhere else apart from in the same direction it had been going, which is leading towards real disrespect, which is leading towards real kind of, and I can only speak about myself, me losing the ability to maintain what I would class as respect for the person, how I deal with her, how I communicate with her, how I'm able to come back and smooth out situations. Yeah, that's where I found the issue with my child potentially growing up in an environment of effing, blinding, screaming, shouting, me not being able to take the high road,
And I think, again, for me, it differs because that wasn't my environment. Although, and just for the record, for the listeners, yours was not you were not physically abusive to your partner. So I'm just putting that out there. My relationship was abusive mentally, emotionally, and physically. However, it was very controlled and calculated. So my children were never aware of anything going on. Nobody, I mean, literally, we could have just had an incident. He could have just had me up against the wall. The doorbell would go. He would answer like nothing, and I would fix up like nothing. And whoever's come through the door would not know
would
anything.
have no clue.
Yeah, because it was just like literally, or I might run to the bathroom and just wash my face or whatever, and I'm back in the room. So I'm thankful that my children were never exposed to that side of things. However, even speaking about it now just kind of reiterates how calculated it was, because it wasn't like I could blow a fuse at any minute in front of anyone and do anything. There was definitely a strategy.
But can I ask you a question then, just about you, the fact, because I, just thinking back to, I don't know, me and my ex-wife kind of having arguments, and then having to go around, I don't know, her family, for example, Sunday dinner, whatever. And I feel like they would be able to tell that I'm vexed or something's gone on or so there's a vibe. You know what I mean? I'm polite and I'm cool, but you can tell
The energy is
something ain't
off.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm in just when you're able to when you're just because you say like the fact that you're able to kind of turn it on. What do you think that says about you at the time? Like you was able to kind of turn off the reality of the situation in that moment. Was it to save face for yourself? Was it to save face for him? Was it just to not have to entertain conversation you didn't want to share with nobody?
I
Do you
think,
understand the question I'm asking?
yeah. And even now when I'm thinking about it, I don't know how I developed that part of me.
Mm,
And now I'm thinking about it, it was really unhealthy because it did mean that I was literally switching off my emotion, which I think
yeah.
maybe, or not maybe, now I'm thinking about it, definitely fed into my whole detached kind of personality. Um,
Mm,
I don't think for 1 minute I could do that now. I do believe that in that situation and in that part of my life,
mm,
I totally valued other people, what they thought, and
okay.
everything else above myself. Um, so if somebody did knock the door, it's like I can't have them know that this is going on, or it's really weird. I would say
Just
though that
what, but in what for what reason though? So you can't have them knowing because they will look down on you or they will judge you. Is that what it is?
I don't
Or
even
they
think
will
it was
judge the
judgment for me. I
situation.
think they judge him, and that's what I'm saying. I was putting
Okay.
him like I could have
Right.
run into the door and scream like, "You need to help me! This guy's mad." But
Mm,
with everything that he was doing, I'm still trying to protect him the way he looks. Um, the relationship, I guess, was an element of it because at the time we were like the social hub, so everyone would kind of come round to ours and do the whole dominoes and cards and jerk
mm,
panting. So it was almost like, yeah, I need to. I don't think it was a conscious. I need nobody to know. I think
mm,
over time it just developed into that, which then empowered him because he knew I could literally do anything.
mm,
And she's not going to tell anybody. I do recall, just going back to the point that you made, going to my grand's after
mm,
something happened in the car on the way down. And my
mm,
grand looked at me and she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I just
mm,
say, "Nothing, Mum, I'm tired." I think I'd not long had a baby as well. So I kind of put it down to that.
mm,
Um, but something that was extraordinary is when I did finally leave and
mm,
I told my gran, and that's one thing he used to say to me, "You can't leave me because your gran loves me." And so to everybody, that was another thing. To everybody else, he was this perfect person. And don't get me wrong, my domestic situation wasn't a beating or something every day or even every week. We could probably go 6 months, even longer, no incident. Then
mm,
something would happen, and that one thing would make him go, like I say, there's been a series of really
mm,
inhumane things that happened. And
mm,
so when they see him saying, "Oh, let me wash your hair," or "Let me grease your scalp," or "He'll squeeze bumps in my face," or whatever, it's like, oh, wow, like he was the model, could cook, could clean, everything. So when other people from the outside are looking in, I'm thinking, she's actually hit the jackpot. I had brethren looking at my relationship saying, "You're so lucky." Like the song says, no one knows what goes on behind closed doors. And I think for me,
mm.
it was very much a case of everybody seeing what they wanted to see, a bit like social media, and behind closed doors, they do not have a clue. But I will wrap this segment up by saying that when I did finally leave and I told my gran what was happening, and it took me a while as well, because like I said, I didn't want her to be disappointed, but she was almost in tears. She's saying, I cannot believe you stayed and you put up with that. You know, she was cussing. When I say cussing him, I've never heard my gran cuss, but don't remember her grandchild. Like, she was cussing. And when I say cussing, she does never uses bad words. Bad words make, she used to say, make her skin curdle.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Curdle. But, you know, damn idiot and the foolish boy and all this kind of thing. Like, she was on. And the same with my dad. Now, my dad's religion doesn't believe that you should end a marriage unless it's on the grounds of adultery. And so while I was very sure that was going on, without proof, I didn't really have a leg to stand on. So I wasn't in a position to say, you know what, Dad, this is going on. I've got evidence of this and I'm out. It just so turns out that a lot was uncovered and I was divorced on the grounds of adultery and obviously the domestic side of things. However, when I told my dad, I can't even remember what his words were. And I didn't even speak about the adultery. I spoke about the domestic, and he was broken in that moment. And I
imagine.
Yeah, he was like, I think part of it was the fact that I didn't tell him.
100%.
Part of it was that I actually went through the things that I went through. And trust me when I say I didn't tell him half the stuff that I actually went through. If he could have taken something and done something, I've never seen my dad so outraged. I've seen him upset. I've seen him sad. I've never seen him as outraged as he was in that moment. And I think it almost felt like a punch in the gut to him when he asked me, why didn't I say anything? And I told him, because, you know, what were you going to do? You're not going to tell me to leave him because the Bible says only on the ground of adultery, and I didn't have evidence. And it almost like, if the words could have come out of his mouth, it would have been, but not for my child, like, not for you. All of that would have been squashed. And I'm not saying...
We don't know that at the time, though, do you?
Yeah. It was really tough. And so it's kind of tough knowing that the two people who I kept it from because I wanted to protect them, their beliefs, their foundation that they'd laid for me, were the two people that were most upset by what I had endured without sharing. So, yeah, reasons for staying, they certainly do vary. And I guess some people, if the shoe's on the other foot, sometimes you're the person who's left, right? And so how does that healing process feel?
Yeah.
I won't repeat what the father of my children said when he realized that I definitely wasn't coming back. It wasn't anything that led me to believe that he genuinely wanted me to give him a 1 zillionth chance again. But yeah, that's a off episode conversation, or maybe
yeah, I'm sure we will. I think yeah, like you said, reasons for staying. It's there's so many reasons for staying. As well as there's, I presume, so many reasons for leaving. And it is all a personal decision, you know? Yeah, I feel like I feel like I feel your dad's pain with you not telling him. I feel like hearing it after the fact would definitely hurt. But I still think that the fact you did tell him the reason why and didn't turn it on yourself is a huge thing. And you broke free of that kind of protecting somebody else over yourself in that moment was a huge thing. And I think for me, it's something, like you said, we're at different stages of the same journey, let's say. And for me, it is still a very difficult time. Whether it's the decision to prioritize myself, whether the decision to prioritize my daughter, and whether that is what I'm doing. So yeah, as I say,
Definitely what you're doing.
yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.